Okay, so we've got our next speaker, Kate. Katie, who I'd like to welcome to the stage. She's the head of marketing for Mabel, and she goes all the way back to the Mercury Interactive days, so she probably will be able to reflect the selenium being the antidote for mercury poisoning. And she probably appreciate, I think nearly you can see my Mercury Man, which is up here, which Steve Filoni has a lot to offer. He's just there, Mr. Mercury Man. I'll get him down in a minute. But it's fantastic to have you on the show, Kate. How's things going?
Doing great. Thanks for having me here today.
Wonderful. Well, I'm going to give you the command and control capabilities because I know, again, you've been very brave and you're presenting live. So hopefully you'll be able to.
I'm going to do my best here. Yeah, let's see here. All right, do you see my slide?
I'll let you go and I'll see you in a bit.
All right, thanks. Thanks so much, everybody, for sticking around for my session. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how low-code enables cross-functional testing today. Let's see, I'm trying to get my screen sorted here. Okay, so as Jonathan mentioned, my name is Katie Staveley. I'm the head of marketing at Mabel. You might be familiar with Mabel. We offer an intelligent low-code test automation solution, which kind of explains why I'm talking about this particular topic today. So I have been with the company for about 1.5 years, but prior to that, I worked for a couple of other testing companies, Mercury Interactive being one of them as part of the HP acquisition. I also worked for another company, Empirics, which did web testing, call center testing, network testing. Both of those were a very long time ago. So you can see that I've sort of been in tech marketing for over 20 years now. So that was a while ago. But most recently, before Mabel, I was at a couple of open source companies. So Acquia is a services company for Drupal, which is open source CMS, and then Mautic was open source marketing automation. So you can see my tech background is pretty diverse, but I think it lends to the work I'm doing here at Mabel today. So anyway, enough about that. So some of the topics I'm going to cover are kind of in three groups. I'm going to start with going over some of the benefits of test automation in DevOps. So talking a little bit about how DevOps is evolving and what that means for test teams or for quality within these fast-paced organizations. I'm also going to talk a little bit about really what, excuse me, what we mean when we talk about low code solutions and how they can potentially help your team improve collaboration. And then lastly, I'm going to dig into some practical tips for implementation. So if you want to go down the path of low code and really just expand test automation within your organization, what are some of the tips that we offer that we've collected from our customers over the past 3 years and in how they've been successful in rolling these types of initiatives out. So let's start by talking a little bit about how DevOps has changed. So, I'm sure that a lot of the things on this slide are not unfamiliar to most of you who are listening in today, but, just observations around, what it was like in early DevOps. Change really just didn't happen that frequently. So we might see changes to software, we might roll out releases every year, maybe twice a year, maybe quarterly. I know, back in the early days of when I was at some of those other software companies, we had 2 big releases, one in the spring and one in the fall. I've been a long-time Salesforce user, and for a long time, Salesforce sort of rolled out big releases with the season. So they'd do a spring release and a summer release and so on and so forth. But really, having that much time in between those releases gave the testing teams and the work that's done to ensure quality a little bit more time to build those tests and execute those tests. I'm sure sometimes when you're in the thick of it, it didn't feel like you had a whole lot of time, but in comparison to the environment that we see today, there was certainly more time to put these things together and to execute against them. In contrast, today's sort of world of DevOps, pipelines are moving a whole lot faster, and releases are happening, bi-weekly, weekly, daily, and even, ad hoc, hourly to some extent. And I'll show a slide a little bit further on, sort of what we're seeing for trends around those things. the reality is that you don't have the time that you used to build, big regression tests, or even, the test that you need to test your showing is that the trend is that again, that deployment frequency is gaining speed. It is getting faster. And so you can see here that the majority of people are saying that their deployments are happening, bi-weekly, weekly, and daily, and those numbers are growing, while the yearly, quarterly, and monthly are declining. So, we just finished wrapping up the survey for 2021. We have all the data. We're going to release the results in the next few weeks, but I anticipate that these bars are going to continue to go up and to the right for these groups of deployment frequency. I don't anticipate that teams are going to get slower at deploying. It's only going to get faster. And so thinking about how do we continue to optimize our own environments and how we're doing things to make sure that we're delivering quality software, even in these fast-paced environments. So with all the promise of DevOps, at the end of the day, what we're really looking for is to be able to create and deploy changes to the code or to your configuration within your software, and to do that constantly. That includes the changes that your team is making, so the updates that your team is doing to the code, but it also includes the changes that are happening from your third-party integrations. So for example, if your solution integrates with Stripe, for payment processing, and you do have to worry about the changes that your team is making to your software, whether it's new features or fixing bugs or whatever it might be, in addition to the updates that Stripe is pushing into their platform or into their solution, and how that impacts your solution. So it's really about both of those elements, but also being able to do that in a way that you're still able to support this high velocity environment and get high throughput. We all want the ability to handle these changes on an active basis without compromising quality, and not scaling back on what we're doing from testing, but to be able to support the testing and deliver the testing that we need to ensure the quality of the product at the end of the day. The reality is that with these fast-paced environments is that testing bottlenecks are actually growing. And we see this a lot with our customers and the folks that we're talking to on a day-to-day basis, is that these bottlenecks are creating a waterfall of symptoms that are slowing down delivery, that are declining customer satisfaction, that are creating stress-filled releases, that result in declining employee satisfaction. And I'm sure that there are other things that you're observing in your organization that are impacting how your team operates as well. So to avoid these bottlenecks, we see it as having two distinct choices, two primary choices. One, you can continue to use the existing testing frameworks and approaches, but reduce the number of tests and reduce your test coverage. If you were to go down that path, I'm sure that you would agree that you're likely to do that at the expense of quality. So you have to look, you'll have to take a step back and ask yourself, what are our customers willing to tolerate in terms of quality if we're going to scale back on testing and only do the bare minimum because we're facing these bottlenecks based on the way that we're handling testing today. The other option is that you can implement strategies and tools that improve efficiency, collaboration, and confidence in your releases. Naturally, our team at Mabel we advocate for solution number two. We believe that teams need better test automation, and it's critical to the success of DevOps to promote collaboration and to really successfully utilize DevOps to its fullest potential. And so the end result, which is what we see here, is the best case scenario where with the help of low code, your team can reach that state where you have high velocity plus high throughput, and also have this watchful and efficient eye of QA along the way that doesn't that makes sure that your quality is best of breed and meeting the expectations of your customers. And I'll talk a little bit more about how we start to get closer to this state a little bit later in today's session. So a couple of more data points that we thought would be useful to share today. So this is a quick data point from a survey that was done by Puppet and Circle CI. And so what this is really saying is that the organizations who have implemented a high level of automation are seeing a high level of a high degree of quality in their quality and confidence in their deployments, where in contrast, the organizations that have a low level of automation, they're actually seeing low level of confidence. I think it's a pretty solid data point. I mean, it's a data point, and we have to take this into consideration among many other things, but it really does speak highly for, you know, the need to think about implementing test automation within your workflow. Not only does test automation help you feel more confident, the more you use it, the more confident you're going to be in your releases. It also helps your team be more efficient. So this is a great quote from one of our customers from Data Robot, you know, talking about thinking, you know, how they can be more efficient with their time. So it's not all just about you know, sort of delivering on this premise of you know, feeling confident, but it's also, you know, finding ways to help your team be more efficient so that they can spend their time on higher value activities while removing those repetitive tasks that can, you know, sort of clog up your day and keep you from doing, you know, more productive work. Another data point that came out of the GitLab survey from last year was that even though we know test automation is critical to DevOps, very few teams have really realized the level of automation that gives them the high confidence in their deployments. And the reality is that siloed teams and technology continue to hold us back on this front. So you can see that 12% of teams that, as part of this survey, claim to have reached that full test automation. The risk of not implementing good test automation practice and solutions is that we'll never be able to realize that vision that we saw earlier in that chart of high velocity, high quality pipelines, because we have to slow the throughput to manage the quality. So this is something that you know, we need to recognize as being an inhibitor of adopting test automation and think about how we might overcome that. So let's take a minute and reflect a little bit on, okay, what we're doing today, what's so bad about that? And not that it's, you know, bad what we're doing, but there are some significant drawbacks to some of the things that teams are doing today when they're not using, you know, full test automation. And the first one really revolves around this idea of developer superhero complex. And so, in short, we asked, you know, our devs to do everything for us, to write feature code, to fix bugs, to write tests, to execute those tests. And when push comes to shove and timelines get short, the first thing that's going to drop is those tests. You know, it never seems to be the top of their list of priorities. And so, you know, and certainly we want to prioritize things like feature work, but it does, you know, it comes at the expense of quality at the end of the day. Writing those script-based frameworks is too hard to assign to anyone but devs or engineers, highly skilled engineers. And so we ask them to be specialized in both writing those scripts, but also being a good tester who applies the right assertions and logic, for example. There are few people that excel at both of these, and certainly not enough to meet the growing demand of the organizations, you know, looking to adopt these high velocity models. So it does, you know, create you know, an inhibitor for moving forward toward that environment. Believe it or not, we think that one of the other drawbacks is that it sometimes can be too easy to create tests. So, for example, you know, it's pretty easy to create a test with Cypress. But the downside is that teams will often create, you know, lots and lots of tests, thousands of tests, and they still have bugs in production. And the reason that they have bugs in production is related to this next point, which is that they're not really creating effective tests. It's just creating test sprawl and creates a whole lot of maintenance, which again requires you to go back to that same team to make updates and changes and maintain all of those tests. And using your highly skilled engineers, your highly skilled team members to execute on that. And they have to do it, not every once in a while, but for every single product update that you're pushing out. So testing becomes, what I lovingly call the evil monkey on your back that everybody wants to get rid of. But the reality is that we can't get rid of it. We need it. Another area is, a drawback is with ROI, right? Return on investment. Our customers have told us that, we have a number of customers who have shared examples of how they've spent a lot of engineer hours creating sophisticated test scripts, running them in the cloud with their favorite cloud provider, cha-ching, right? And the only thing out there, or the only thing that happens in the end is that they have all these tests and they're hard to maintain and they're complex. You need all these, highly skilled people to do that, and then they end up throwing them out shortly after because the complexity becomes overwhelming. That it's not worth their time and effort and resources to redo those things, but to really just start over. And the last one, which is a drawback with some of these existing solutions, is that it's really difficult to collaborate across teams. So when you're relying on tests that are scripted and you have too many manual components that take too much time and effort to update and maintain, are too complex, it's really hard to collaborate across teams. And without collaboration and broader participation by more team members in the testing process, it's nearly impossible to scale your business as that development speeds up. So the result, democratizing testing with low-code intelligent test automation is the alternative, and that's how, that's our point of view. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more about why we think that. So I'm sure that you've seen lots of topics and conversations emerge around low code. So what's so special about it? Why should we care about this? Well, when we don't adopt low code, we limit the number of people and roles that can participate in quality. So I just talked about how we have this sort of developer complex where we have to involve highly skilled engineers and developers to maintain and write our codes. Our tests. And so when we're not thinking with a low code approach or using a low code approach, that reliance becomes the bottleneck. Whereas if we had a low code solution, we would be able to include more people in that testing process. The second area is it's really easy to explain in the context of Mabel. So for our solution, our core architecture separates what we call intent from implementation. And you can see that here in the slide. In other words, what we mean is that we're separating the test, that the thing that you're looking for or evaluating from the automation, which is how that intent is manifested in the execution of the test. By letting the system or the automation piece, meaning the solution that you're using, and if it, in our case, our customers are using Mabel to do this, by letting that system handle that automation, you empower your teams to really focus on the intent of the test, describing the functionality in the form of the test or a use case that needs to be validated. And so with low code, users are presented with the interface for creating the test while letting the system really handle the implementation so your team doesn't have to. And so for Mabel, again, we offer this in the cloud. And so all of this is cloud hosted, and literally all your team has to do is log in, build, run, and manage your tests. So you never have to worry about the hosting component, and all of the things that are required to stand it up and create cross-browser environments. All of that is handled as part of a single platform with Mabel. And so at the end of the day, the benefit is that this reduces the need for highly skilled team members to take all the burden of setting up and running and maintaining those tests. Your devs and your quality engineers and your manual testers and your product owners can all participate in quality, ultimately giving you an opportunity to improve collaboration and break down those silos across your team. To take that a step further, once there's a separation between that intent and implementation, meaning that the creation of the tests and the execution of those tests, the system can be more than just this execution engine. It can start to incorporate advanced capabilities like machine learning and AI to create an intelligent test automation system. So one simple example of how this would work is that let's say you're building a test around a submit form. And you have a submit button on that form. So if you, as part of one of your updates, change that button and the ID changes, most tests today would break as a result. The way that auto healing is what we call it at Mabel. The way that that works for us is that we actually use other factors to collect information about those different elements on the page. So your submit button will have other characteristics collected about it. So we can still identify that the button is there, even if that ID changes. And on top of that, it's not only the identification of that button and understanding that it exists, but it's also updating your test to be able to automatically revise that test so that you don't have to go back in and fix it later on, even if that ID has changed. So that is the special sauce in Mabel that automatically updates the test with the changes. And because we've separated this intent from the system, that allows us to build these additional capabilities into the platform that your team never has to worry about building, but they can certainly enjoy the benefit of. So we've established that low code plus intelligence gives us the ability to solve a lot of these challenges that we've seen with test automation in the past. But I'm sure it comes to no surprise to you that technology is really only one piece of the puzzle. The real benefit comes when you're rolling out these solutions across the organization and fitting them into the interactions with the right roles. In other words, it's really just a tool without the right process and people in place to make it work at the end of the day. So if we skip the people and process part, we'll continue to see failures in these initiatives, despite the fact that the technology is here. And you can see from this stat from Gartner that 75% of DevOps initiatives fail because they don't meet the expectations for organizational change and learning. We know change is hard, but we can do hard things. So let's start to dive into how do we solve this problem? So, so some practical tips for ensuring a smooth transition if you are sort of starting to think about implementing test automation and accelerating those timeframes and eliminating those testing bottlenecks. So our customers will typically think about their implementation strategy in sort of three groups: the planning phase, the implementation phase, and the iteration phase. And then working on collaborating with their team at each of those phases so that they can ensure a smooth rollout and wide adoption of the right solution. Before we get into each of the stages, I think it's worth taking a minute to recognize how quality is changing. So within a DevOps practice, what we've observed is that the role of QA is slowly evolving into a QE practice. So what used to be quality assurance, where teams and team members would spend a lot of their time on manual testing, automated test framework maintenance. They might be siloed from developers or the rest of the engineering team. Testing was oftentimes concentrated in the last couple of stages of the release cycle. And there's a struggle with a disconnect between the customers and the testing strategy. As quality is evolving within today's DevOps organizations, it's really more of a quality engineering mindset. And that starts with quality professionals becoming advisors to product teams and developers. So establishing best practices, maybe creating the right types of tests and handing those over to the development team to implement earlier in the testing process. So not starting these tests at the end, but you really using test automation to start as early as the code stage, going into the pull request stage, to the to the deploy stage, as well as the running stage, even after things go into production. It's also really sort of refocusing the time and effort on high impact manual testing, or other types of testing. So we recognize that everything is not going to be automated every step of the way. Our team, we're doing testing internally on our own platform, and there are places where we apply our own test automation, and there are places where we do other types of testing. But really, this quality engineering role, when you're removing the repetitive tasks from their plate and giving them the opportunity to sort of contribute in more high value ways, this is one of the ways that it emerges as part of creating more higher value manual tests, or maybe more exploratory testing and things like that. And the last area is that these teams are becoming more data-driven and collaborative with that data. So using behavior data or test output data to inform the quality strategy. So having that data not only accessible but visible across the team. So as you're identifying bugs, for example, maybe in your platform, and you're sharing information back to your dev team, including all the data and information along with that, with that issue as you're looking for resolution or a bug fix. So let's jump into the planning stage. Planning is pretty self-explanatory, but it's simply the time when you're really pulling together your strategy, looking for potential solutions, figuring out how you're going to tackle integrating test automation into your workflow. The now and the future of quality is that it's a team sport. And, this is where I tell you how much I hate sports analogies in business, but I continue to use them because I'm a total hypocrite. But anyway, I digress. The point at hand is that even in the early stage, it's important to be thinking about, about the team as a whole right out of the gate. So starting with identifying folks in your organization that will participate and what their roles are. So not only participate in this early process, but throughout your journey with test automation. What are their roles? Are they active participants? Are they passive participants? Maybe they're just approvers, maybe they're observers. There are different ways that you can sort of identify folks and really understand where they kind of fit into the big picture. And then subsequently working with these stakeholders to gather the requirements and establish goals and success criteria. So making sure that you're all on the same page as to what you're trying to accomplish and what do you think those outcomes should be. So what does it look like in our organization if we're to roll this out 6 months from now, 12 months from now, 18 months from now? What do we hope that we'll achieve, and some of the things that we think are going to help move the needle and make an impact on the business. Using all of this information that you're collecting up front as a guide for evaluating solutions. So if you are looking to bring in a new solution, you want to make sure that you have these things at your fingertips. And you also want to understand pretty clearly where your flexibility is. And what I mean by that is, what are you willing to trade off as part of this process? Inevitably in any sort of technology decision, there are going to be trade-offs. So what are the things that are going to be your priority, and what are the things that you're going to be like, it's okay if we let that go. It's not as important as some of these other things. Lastly, it's one thing that we've seen that's worked really well for our customers is just setting realistic expectations across the team. And even that includes your business executives. So, people are an important part of, your organization, an important part of this process. We just talked about that Gartner stat that, it's just technology until you have the process and people together. This is a big piece of it. So setting the right expectations with your team and making them feel comfortable with understanding what's coming and what to expect and when the changes are happening. People generally are more at ease when they know, what to expect down the road. And as a reminder, all of this is supposed to be collaborative. So make sure you lean on your teammates to help you tackle the project as a whole. Building relationships from the beginning will carry over into the other stages and help you build that quality of culture of quality right from the beginning. So next is the implementation phase. And so you started with this great foundation with your stakeholders, your goals, your objectives, all of those things. And now you want to start to think about formalizing your strategy and tactics. So things like creating a process for test creation and test maintenance. So making sure that you know how you want to create tests, when you want to create tests, who's going to create those tests, who's going to run those tests, how are you going to internalize the information and test output. You're really thinking about what that process looks like. And it doesn't have to be what the process should be 5 years from now. It's just going to be the process like, okay, to get us started through phase 1, what does it look like? And then maybe start to think about, okay, what does phase 2 look like and how does the process change? But because this will be new and it'll be a transition, you're going to want to make sure that you're absorbing what you're learning along the way. The next one I think is probably pretty self-explanatory. This is not uncommon for teams like yours to be thinking about where are the high impact areas to start with. Where are the things that I absolutely need test coverage and I absolutely know is a problem area that we need to start first. The next one, crawl, walk, run is, again, I've been around tech companies and tech solutions for a really long time. And I feel like I've said this literally at every single company is that the approach is to think about a crawl, walk, run approach, right? Start small. You don't have to boil the ocean. You don't have to do everything up front. So think about how you can start to introduce test automation early, start small, and then grow from there. So one of our customers told us recently that their approach was to say, okay, every sprint, we're going to ask the team to write 1 or 2 test cases, and then we're going to implement those. So rather than saying, okay, we have to rip out all of our Selenium and now we have to replace all that with, Mabel tests. No, we're going to say, you know what, we have this new project, this new product, this team's moving to CI/CD. We're going to start here. We're going to, start with a couple of tests up front, and then we're going to grow from there. And then from there, once we have this group going and we've gotten the kinks out of it, now we're going to introduce this to the next group and to the next group. So we often see this among our teams with, our customers and how they're rolling out solutions within their organization. The next one, just documenting simple test data adoption. I don't need to tell you how important documentation is. We all know that people learn at different speeds in different ways. And so documentation is just one of those tactics that can help you not only help your team get up to speed today, but as you add new team members down the road, having these things documented will only make that onboarding simpler and faster and help you maintain the speed that you need. And then the last one is really something that we're starting to see emerge more and more among our customers, which I think is such a great idea, is that, I talked a little bit about that emergence of quality engineering and the transition from quality assurance and being this coach among the whole team. Our customers are starting to, play this role of having open office hours where, they invite their team members to ask them about testing best practices or, other things that they're struggling with on the front of testing, so that the burden isn't always on the quality team to just execute everything, but that this is how they're helping the rest of their team adopt these solutions and collaborate and be better stewards of quality across the board. So the third stage here is iteration. And again, I think some of these things are probably pretty obvious, but first things first is measure your results. I talked a little bit about establishing what your goals and objectives are. So starting with those goals and those objectives, whether it's more test coverage or it's fewer bugs in production, whatever the metric is that's most important to your business, figure out what your benchmark is. It's like, okay, where are we today? What is our test coverage today? Maybe it's 20%, and our goal is to get it to 50%. Make sure you have that benchmark and start to measure those results and figure out where, how your progress is going and where the gaps might still be. So, along the way, using that data, taking a data-driven approach to inform your team and better track, where you need to focus in the future. Reviewing and iterating on your tests, making sure that you continue to go back and look at these things and make sure that they're doing what you want them to do. Are they still capturing, true user behavior? Are they still the happy path? Is it still, are they still working the way that you want them to work? Is there something new in the product a new step along the way that you've introduced that you need to make sure that the test is updated? The nice thing about low code is that maintenance part is really easy. It's just a couple of clicks and you can update a test. And if you do have to rebuild a whole test, you can take some of these, data flows and data tables and things like that and actually port them over into a new test. So you can literally copy that test over pretty quickly and easily. So really thinking about how you want to iterate on your test. And if you're freeing yourself up from those repetitive tasks of actually executing all this stuff manually, it gives you the ability to kind of continue to, audit these things and make sure that they're doing the work that you want them to do. Thinking about expanding with integration. So, how are you integrating with the tools that your team is already using? Is it Slack? Is it, GitHub? Is it Bitbucket? Is it Jira? What are the things that your team is using? And how are you going to, continue to facilitate, this test automation or embed test automation in your workflow through these integrations. And that can be a combination of integrating through APIs, but it also can be native integrations. Mabel has native integrations with a number of core solutions, and so it just makes it easier for you to kind of continue on this, phased approach. And lastly, identifying new areas for test automation. So I had mentioned earlier, thinking about, maybe you're starting with one team today and then looking at other teams in the future as the needs arise across the organization. So the last thing I wanted to just quickly touch on here is, a little bit about Mabel.com or Mabel. So we are an intelligent test automation solution for agile teams. And our low-code platform can, sort of help you in 4 key areas. So increasing test coverage, so you can create, run and manage all of your automated browser, API, mobile tests from a single platform, and that's across browsers. So we do support multiple browsers for all of those tests as well. You can run them in parallel. You can run them, one behind another. Either way, you have the ability to run all of these tests from a single place. Improving test reliability with our auto heal. I talked a little bit about that earlier. Testing at the speed of development. So we do offer a low-code solution so that anyone can build and run those tests. So it does make it easier for you to alleviate those bottlenecks and make sure that you're, getting the test coverage you need. And then lastly, integrating with your workflow. So using those native integrations to bring test automation into your pipeline in a seamless way. So that's all I have for today. Again, I'm Katie Staveley with Mabel. You can reach me at that email address if there's any questions as a follow-up to today's discussion. I'm happy to personally answer those, or if there's anything you want to learn about Mabel, I'm happy to pass those along to our team members as well. And if you have any Mercury man. If you want to learn more about Mabel, feel free to check us out at the expo or stop by Mabel.com. Wow, he's a handsome devil, isn't he? I can't hear you, Jonathan. Are you on mute?
Sorry, it was a great session. Thank you very much. I think Mercury Man lost his voice. I think he didn't come with the voice. He's not like Woody, so you can't pull a cord. But maybe iteration 2, we'll get some Mabel men. I think that could potentially be the marketing move. And yeah, I don't mind dressing up at one in a physical event, like a big suit, and dancing around. It's definitely worth it's something I want to do. So thanks so much.
I'm taking a note on that, Jonathan.
Yeah, think about it. If it goes live, I want at least one copy of the toy to play with.
Absolutely, you got it.
Fantastic. All right, thanks so much, Kay from Mabel. Great session. So we're now on to the last speaker before the break. So the great news here is, well, we've got about